Hi and welcome to Fast Forward. I'm Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com, and this is a special Mobile World Congress edition of the show. We're here at the UCLA booth on the trade show floor, and we're talking to some of the leaders and pioneers in the mobile technology industry. I have one of those leaders with me now. It is Dr. Pernilla Jonsson, the head of the Ericsson Consumer Lab. And basically, your whole job is to figure out how all of these technologies are affecting the way we live, the way we work, and the way we get by in the world. Pernilla, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So it's day one of Mobile World Congress. It's a very international show. For our US audience, can you just tell me a little bit about why Mobile World Congress is such an important show globally?
Well, I would say just because it's so multicultural, you see people from all over the world coming here and merging and talking about the same stuff and getting really excited about what you can do with ICT and mobile broadband in different types of environments. And
it's a mobile show, so people instantly think phones, but it's actually much more than just the handsets. It's also the network, the infrastructure, and all the applications that go with it.
Yes, and in the end, it's all about when technology actually reaches the hands of humans, right? Because that's when value is created, and we can see how this will change our everyday lives.
So right before the show, Gartner released numbers that said for the first time ever, smartphone sales had actually declined in the fourth quarter of last year. Interesting timing right before this show starts. Have we gotten to the point where we've reached sort of peak smartphone and now we're just going to go on to an upgrade cycle the way we have with PCs?
Do you know that right now, every lecture I do, I start with asking the audience a question. Have we reached peak smartphone? And no one yet have I ever gotten a majority of the
audience.
Yeah, the audience saying that we have. And it's so interesting that you're coming with this number, because consumers are actually increasingly seeing a future beyond the smartphone, and that future is becoming increasingly clear to them.
So what is that going to mean? So we've talked about smartphones and the features that have been built into them. Just last night, Samsung announced the Galaxy S9, their latest generation hero phone. You know, what does the future smartphone look like? What kind of new features is it going to have?
Well, I would like to actually look beyond the smartphone as a whole and instead look to what type of environment we will be traveling into. And in this year's 10 of Consumer Trends, our first trend is called the body is the user interface. And that is because we can see that increasingly consumers actually expect something else to take over or at least grow up alongside the smartphone. So consumers in 2020 expect us to have at least 5 devices, of which the smartphone is just one. So we're moving into a multi-device environment where consumers actually expect us to use other interfaces and screens. They use of our bodies, our voice with smart speakers, or having smart earbuds in our ears. And
the smart earbud space doesn't get a lot of attention, but you see a couple of manufacturers have tried to come out with smart earbuds that can do instantaneous translation.
Yes.
And when you think about killer applications for earbuds, if the company that can get that right is going to do very, very well, because it seems like there's enormous demand for it.
Yeah, so we are seeing the baby steps, and let's face it, we also expect, we need to have the infrastructure in place in order for all of this to work. So it's not just the devices that needs to be in place, but also the type of connectivity, 5G connectivity, that needs to be in place so we don't get that lag when our earbuds are translating things. And also we need to get AI on a much higher level so that they can wave in together information from a lot of devices and actually predict our needs and help us before we even know it.
So you mentioned 5G. I've been going to Mobile World Congress for a number of years. 5G has been a topic of conversation for years before we even knew that 5G, what 5G would look like. I think this is maybe the first or second show where there's hardware available. We sort of know how it's going to work. What's your take on sort of the rollout of 5G networks across the globe?
I think it depends on a lot of things, of course. We just released a report that explained what the consumer sees that the service provider needs to do in order for them to kind of pave the way for consumers in order to reach a willingness to pay for 5G. And it's a lot about actually inventing in how you address the consumers and what offers you give and how you can work with data plans in smart ways and pinpointing those use cases that actually produce value for consumers. And there we have a long way to go, actually. We need to reinvent ourselves a little bit and what we can do with this.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me there have to be applications that are not just voice data and text.
Yeah.
Like, because LTE is fine for that. And that next generation of applications, I don't know where the innovation comes from. Is it from software developers?
Yeah.
Is it from cities
Yeah.
that are rolling out 5G services? Where do you think the innovation is going to come from?
So basically, as of December 1st, we are not actually just consumer lab anymore. We are consumer and industry lab.
Very good.
So we are actually exploring the 5G for industries era as well. And of course, there are a lot of use cases and applications in that end. But when it comes to the consumer side, we really need to, we have just started digging into those use cases. And that is one of the subjects that the consumer lab part of my team is discussing every day on how to actually approach and do a really good job with. So you'll have to ask again next year.
Okay, I'll be back. I will be back. Yeah. Every time I come to Europe, I always want to talk to people about how Europeans see privacy, because they see it very differently than Americans do. When I give talks in Europe, the first question is always about the privacy of whatever subject I'm talking about and privacy implications. That never happens in the U.S. Can you just talk a little bit about how Europeans see privacy differently and how it sort of affects digital technologies?
Well, at Consumer Lab, we have followed the privacy issue for a number of years now, and we do that always on a global level. So when you look at it, you can see that in study after study, we get type of the same results. So consumers are worried about privacy issues, but it's a very kind of diffuse type of threat. It's not very clear what the threat is all about, and they feel kind of limited in what they can do about it. Moreover, consumers are very, very aware that the benefits of working with ICT solutions, smartphones, giving away data from usage and so on, weigh out the risks. So the benefits are much higher than the perceived risk. And as long as consumers actually perceive it in that way, we don't have a problem. We can also see that for consumers to be okay with us using their data, there need to be 3 conditions in place. So it's permissibility, that you actually give your consent to how you are to use the data. It is transparency in how data is to be used. And then also that you have this perception of that the advantages are actually beneficiary for you. If those 3 things are in place, you're okay with it.
And how do you see, in the United States, we've been talking about social networks and advertising, and the way advertising can be used to manipulate consumer opinion and political opinion even.
Yes.
Technically, there's no violation of privacy because these services are making these advertisements available to anybody who logs on. Does that change the privacy equation at all when it's a social media company that's using advertising tactics to deliver political messages?
Well, I think that the debate is consumers are aware of social media becoming very much like a broadcasting media. And the perception is still, as social media to CMOs and so on, it's a peer-to-peer kind of, we kind of think of it as a peer-to-peer type of media, but it's not anymore. And consumers are aware. In our latest study for the 10 consumer trends, we could see that over half of the consumers actually view social media as a broadcasting medium. And so they are aware about this, but they, again, their power to actually influence this is quite limited, and they perceive it as quite limited. So, consumers are not stupid. If they are aware that we have this this setting, and they will be increasingly critical against the information that is posted on social media. And that's a problem because, you will have this, what are we going to believe in and so on.
Yeah, I think there's an education that needs to take place, like any new technology, that you need to understand how it works and the truthfulness of what you see on social media, the same way we developed a sense of what we believe online and on websites. We're developing that new sense for social media as well.
Yes, and I actually think that this might be the beginning of a renaissance for the publisher and the brand behind a certain type of information. So if you trust the source, then you won't have a problem with the information. In the media business, this is really interesting.
I'm going to send I'm going to clip this interview. I'm going to send that to my boss. Because as a media publisher, I'm hoping that that's the direction that we go in.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up another sort of area of new media, which is voice assistants and AI.
Yes.
And the sort of assistants like Amazon Alexa or Cortana or even Siri, that it seems to me that we're going to be relying on more and more for not just to perform actions and turn the radio station for us, but to help us shop, to help us get information. All those AIs and all those assistants are being built by private companies with their own agendas.
Yes.
So are we going to reach a point where we have to decide what assistants we trust, and how are consumers going to be able to make that choice?
That's so interesting. I have for a while been talking about that. Buying things, consumer choice used to be about the brand, but perhaps in the future it will not be about the brand choice, but about the chooser, as you say. And that's a very interesting scenario, because if we go to the US, where Prime is really well built out, and Amazon has its Alexa with that is built purely for shopping, you see a very interesting reality developing. And here I think that consumers, I will actually talk about this in my speech tomorrow, so I can't talk too much about it.
Ruin the surprise.
But I think it will be very interesting, because consumers are expecting very much of everyday tasks of buying things to be automated and be serviced around newly redefined needs that they have. So I think our everyday lives will be kind of transformed around this new type of services that will come with the new type of retail infrastructure and these type of search engines.
Yeah, it's taking the search engine dynamic, which Google operated based on search engine optimization, but now it'll be every assistant can have its own presets and its own defaults.
Yes.
And that comes with some consequences for a consumer.
Yes, it does. And right now I actually my brother lives in Silicon Valley, and we went there, my whole family, over Christmas. And we had a lot of fun playing around with their Alexa. But, even kids get tired of, telling Alexa to turn off the Christmas lights, So what we really need is a revolution in AI, which can actually reform how we think about evolving consumer needs and need families, sort of, and deliver on them. Because those we can't conceptualize around tiny needs, but it needs to be kind of many needs put together in a smart way creates a substantial amount of value that you can actually deliver on. So instead of turning on the lights, you need to have Alexa actually predicting how the lighting of the house should be for you, so you don't even have to think about it ever. Then you have something that you can talk to an electricity company around, and
Yeah, we've actually been testing a lot of the Alexa games that they're trying to get families to gather around the Alexa to play voice games.
Yeah.
So far, they don't work very well. We haven't tested any that are that much fun, but you can see down the road that there's going to be this voice interface that'll just be ongoing.
Yes.
And it'll be more than just collecting information or turning the lights on and off. There'll be applications and engagements that could replace the engagement you have with your television.
Yes, and I think that the voice is just the beginning. It will be not just voice, but bodily gestures, and maybe also through our new augmented reality glasses and stuff like that. So I think that our bodies will become kind of the user interface when we interact with technology, and so does the consumers. 55%, I think, of the intelligent voice assistant users think that this will happen, and that it will only happen in 2 to 3 years from now. So
I think the number of people, when we first reviewed the Alexa, we gave it a so-so review because we didn't think it was a great Bluetooth speaker. There were cheaper versions on the market. And then after using it for 6 months and realizing it wasn't really just a Bluetooth speaker, it did all these other things. We had to re-review it and change our assessment. But people who have used the Assistant, and I know it's not a global technology yet, are extraordinarily bullish on it. They think it really transforms their life.
Yeah, and this is what you need to think about. You need to think about the context in which a technology is used and the need which it serves. And I think that we are just in the beginning of viewing. I will talk about this tomorrow, shopping beyond the smartphone. We are right now in mobile-geddon, but you know, what is becoming beyond that, and how will retail brands like IKEA, who is with me on stage tomorrow, tackle this new reality? And what does it mean for service providers and the ICT industry?
Yeah, the mobile shopping question is really interesting. There's almost 2 parts to it. One, can you use your phone to transact in the physical world, for retail, NFC and contactless payments, and there's that whole model, which I think it's taken longer than we thought to catch on, at least in the U.S., just because there's so many different technologies out there. And then there's the sort of mobile banking, mobile money transfers, and online shopping, which, again, I think most people in the U.S. would prefer to click Amazon buying buttons on their desktop or laptop, or even a tablet, as opposed to their phone. But what does your research show? Like, are people ready to move fully to mobile, and then what comes next?
Well, yes, globally you can see that people are definitely ready to move into mobile, and they think that a majority of the consumers actually think that most of the shopping will be done on smartphones in just a few years from now. And in Shanghai, which is the city that is leapfrogging this development, they see people really buying into this type of behavior. So they are kind of they are seeing everything moving into the smartphone, basically. However, I think that there is also something beyond this, and this is what we are seeing the beginning of with devices like smart speakers and so on, and search engines that are, you know, focused on a different thing than just searching for anything.
I want to, another survey that just came out just last week in the United States is that more than half of U.S. parents think that their children are addicted to technology, and they would refer to them as addicted. And I don't think, I mean, do you think that that's just parents being old and not understanding their kids, or do you think there is such a thing as technology addiction that we should be worried about?
I thought it was so funny. I actually went to my son's school and lectured for his class of 9-year-olds, and I asked them, do your parents think that you're all too addicted to your smartphones and iPads? And everybody raised their hands. And then I said, how many of you think that your parents are addicted to their computers and their smartphones? And everybody raised their hand. So we have a tendency to see the kids doing this, but we don't really look at ourselves and ask ourselves how much we sit with our devices. And I think it's kind of funny because the morality when it comes to this is often, you know, directed towards the kids and how they use technology, and that's not good that they are sitting still and stuff like that. But we don't really take a hard look at ourselves and ask how we actually interact with this. So is it a problem that we use screens too much and so on, and that we sit still and get obese? And of course it is. I'm not saying anything against that. But I do think that we need to think about this in a different way, and also understand that the screen age might just be one period in, you know, a development where we will interact with technology in many new ways that we are not yet perhaps seeing.
I would almost prefer it if people would sit still and use their screens as opposed to walking down the sidewalk in Manhattan with their screen in their face, not looking where they're going.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
There's a lot more of that in New York City than I'd like to see.
Yeah, but maybe, you know, when they get their glasses on, they can at least fake that they're not.
It would be just anything that gets people to look up.
Yeah.
Just look up at the world around you instead of looking down at your phone. I want to ask you some of the closing questions that I ask everybody that comes on Fast Forward. Is there a technology trend that concerns you or that keeps you up at night?
I think that all technology are a double-edged sword. It can be used for good purposes and it can be used for bad purposes. And I think it's, you know, you really need to discuss things like privacy, for instance, understand and how to, you know, walk that path in an ethical and responsible way, because that's the only way to make a business sustainable in the long run. So I agree, we need to discuss the pros and cons of everything, like people sitting too much with their screens and you know, screens disturbing social interaction and everything like that. And I think through discussing them, that's how we can actually reach a way forward to handle it in a good way.
Very good. Is there a technology or an app or a gadget or a service that you use every day that inspires wonder that you can't live without?
Oh, you know, I love my smartphone, so I am just...
Everybody says their smartphone, though.
Yeah, it is the remote control to life, and I think that is why we have such a hard time lifting our, you know, our gaze from it and seeing that there might be another future out there for us to grab.
Right. If people want to follow you and follow your work, obviously they can listen to your talk tomorrow. Yep. We'll be covering it on PCMag.com, but how can they find you online?
Yeah, well, I am at Ericsson, of course, so and I have a Twitter account, Dr. Jonsson, yeah, okay. And so on, so yeah, and on LinkedIn, of course, yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's Fast Forward for today. We're going to have lots more interviews from the show floor. Follow PCMag.com for all the show news, and I'll see you in the future.